Sheriff's Deputy Rick Grimes is wounded in the line of duty and falls into a coma. When he awakens, the world has changed. A deadly outbreak has turned most of the population into flesh-eating undead, known as walkers. Rick stumbles upon Morgan Jones and his son Dwayne, who help him understand the grim reality, including the fate of Morgan's wife, Jenny, who turned and now lingers near their home. Determined to find his family, Rick arms himself and sets out for Atlanta, believing it to be a safe zone, but instead finds the city overrun with walkers. Trapped inside a tank, he nearly loses hope until a voice crackles through the radio, proving he isn't alone. Outside the city, Rick's former partner, Shane Walsh, has assumed leadership over a group of survivors, including Lori and Carl, Rick's wife and son, who believe Rick is dead. In his absence, Shane and Lori have grown close, forming a complicated relationship. Meanwhile, inside Atlanta, Rick is saved by Glenn, a resourceful scavenger, and joins a small group of survivors hiding in a department store. Among them are Andrea, T-Dog, and Merle Dixon, a violent racist whose behavior forces Rick to handcuff him to a rooftop before their escape. Disguising themselves with walker entrails, Rick and Glenn lead the group to safety, but Merle is left behind, along with a crucial bag of weapons. Back at camp, Rick reunites with Lori and Carl, but his return causes tension. Lori is shaken, and Shane is frustrated at losing his newfound role in their lives. Guilt-ridden over Merle, Rick assembles a team, including Merle's brother Daryl, to rescue him. However, when they reach the rooftop, they find only Merle's severed hand, evidence of a desperate escape. Their mission is further complicated when Glenn is kidnapped by a group that turns out to be protecting elderly survivors in a nursing home. Choosing diplomacy over violence, Rick offers them weapons in exchange for Glenn's release, avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. Back at camp, Jim, haunted by visions of death, begins digging graves, an eerie premonition of the horrors to come. That night, a herd of walkers breaches their defenses, killing several members, including Andrea's sister, Amy. The loss shatters the group, and as they bury their dead, tensions rise between Rick and Shane, culminating in a heated argument over leadership and survival. The situation worsens when Jim reveals a walker bite, sealing his fate. With no cure in sight, the group honors his final wish, leaving him behind to face his fate alone. Desperate for answers, Rick leads the survivors to the CDC, hoping for refuge. When they arrive, the building appears abandoned, but Rick refuses to give up. Pounding on the doors, he begs for help, and just as all hope seems lost, the facility opens its doors. As they step inside, they have no idea what awaits them: answers, salvation, or something far more dangerous. Rick leads the group away from Atlanta, hoping to find safety at Fort Benning. As they navigate the road, they encounter a massive herd of walkers, forcing them into hiding. In the chaos, Carol's young daughter, Sophia, is chased into the woods and goes missing. Desperate to find her, Rick and Daryl lead a search party while tensions rise among the group. Andrea blames Dale for taking away her right to die back at the CDC, and Shane begins to resent Rick's leadership, as well as his closeness to Lori and Carl. As Rick questions whether he is making the right choices, tragedy strikes when Carl's accidentally shot. Otis, the man who shot Carl, leads Rick to a nearby farm owned by veterinarian Herschel Green. Herschel works to save Carl but requires additional medical supplies for surgery. While Rick clings to hope, Herschel insists that humanity will find a cure for the outbreak. Determined to help, Shane teams up with Otis to retrieve the supplies from a FEMA shelter, but their mission turns deadly when they are swarmed by walkers. In a desperate act of survival, Shane sacrifices Otis, leaving him behind as bait. He returns to the farm alone, claiming Otis gave his life for Carl. The surgery is successful, but the weight of Shane's actions begins to change him. As the group settles on the farm, they continue searching for Sophia. Andrea grapples with her will to live, while Glenn bonds with Herschel's daughter, Maggie, and begins questioning his own faith. Meanwhile, Lori secretly discovers she is pregnant, adding another layer of uncertainty to their survival. Daryl, despite his rough exterior, gives Carol a Cherokee rose as a symbol of hope that they will find Sophia. However, as time passes with no sign of her, Shane grows frustrated and pressures Rick to abandon the search. During one of his scouting trips, Daryl is injured in a fall, and hallucinates his missing brother, Merle, before mustering the strength to return to camp. Meanwhile, Glenn stumbles upon a dark secret. Herschel has been keeping walkers locked in the barn, believing them to be sick rather than dead. Glenn struggles to keep Herschel's secrets, which now include both the barn walkers and Lori's pregnancy. As tensions rise, Shane becomes increasingly unhinged, suspecting that Rick cannot protect the group. Dale, sensing Shane's instability, warns him against his violent tendencies. Herschel remains convinced that the dead can be saved, but Maggie, after witnessing an attack at the pharmacy, begins to question her father's beliefs. Finally, Glenn exposes the barn to the group, leading Shane to take drastic action. He forces the others to face reality by breaking open the barn and gunning down the walkers inside. The horror of the moment is amplified when the last walker to emerge is Sophia. Frozen in grief, the group watches in silence until Rick steps forward and ends her suffering. The group reels from their losses, struggling to find meaning in their harsh new world. Herschel, devastated, flees to a nearby bar, seeking solace in alcohol. Meanwhile, Rick and Glenn track him down and attempt to convince him to return, but their conversation is interrupted when two strangers, Dave and Tony, arrive and pose a potential threat. When negotiations turn hostile, Rick is forced to kill them. At the farm, Shane's obsession with Lori deepens, and he manipulates circumstances to push Rick aside. The tension between the two men escalates when Shane leads Rick into the woods, intent on killing him. In a shocking moment, Rick stabs Shane, realizing that his friend had become too dangerous. As Shane dies and reanimates, Carl shoots him, marking a loss of innocence. The sound of the gunshot draws a massive walker herd toward the farm, setting the stage for the final battle. After months of surviving on the road,
I really hope they find a cozy new place to call home this season. They deserve
and more united
Only
under
one
his
way to
leadership.
find out.
However, Rick and Carl have distanced themselves from Lori after her reaction to Shane's death. When they come across a seemingly abandoned prison, Rick and Daryl lead the group in clearing it of walkers to establish a new home. During the process, Herschel is bitten on the ankle. In a desperate attempt to save him, Rick amputates his leg, only for the group to realize they are not alone. The prison still houses 5 surviving convicts. Meanwhile, Andrea, now sick and weak, is being cared for by Michonne. Rick asserts control over the prison and attempts to negotiate with the convicts, but their leader, Tomas, proves dangerous. Rick swiftly kills Tomas and leaves his ally Andrew to die among walkers, while sparing the remaining convicts, Oscar and Axel, allowing them to stay in a separate cell block. Herschel is treated by Carol and Lori, and to everyone's relief, he survives, proving that Rick's amputation saved him from turning. Meanwhile, Andrea and Michonne are drawn to the site of a helicopter crash, where they are captured by Merle and brought to Woodbury, a fortified community led by the enigmatic governor. While Andrea is charmed by the town's safety, Michonne remains distrustful. The governor soon reveals his ruthless nature when he ambushes and slaughters a group of soldiers, looting their supplies and keeping their severed heads as trophies. Back at the prison, chaos erupts when walkers are unleashed inside. T-Dog is bitten and sacrifices himself to save Carol, who disappears in the aftermath. Meanwhile, Lori goes into labor in the middle of the attack, and Maggie is forced to perform an emergency C-section, resulting in Lori's death. To prevent her reanimation, Carl makes the painful decision to shoot his mother. As the group mourns their losses, Rick is shattered and spirals into a violent rampage. Over in Woodbury, the governor hosts brutal gladiator-style fights, reinforcing his rule. Michonne's suspicions are validated when she uncovers the governor's undead daughter, Penny. Confronting him, she kills Penny and wounds the governor, solidifying his hatred for her. As punishment, he forces Merle and captured Daryl to fight to the death in a public spectacle. Rick and Maggie stage a rescue, freeing Daryl but refusing to take Merle back to the prison. Choosing his brother over the group, Daryl leaves with Merle. Meanwhile, Rick struggles with leadership as Woodbury reels from the chaos. Glenn, seething with rage over Maggie's capture, clashes with Rick, while Herschel urges him to accept new survivors like Tyrese's group. However, Rick begins to unravel mentally, haunted by hallucinations of Lori. Elsewhere, the governor exacts revenge by launching a surprise assault on the prison, killing Axel and releasing a herd of walkers. Though the group fights back, the attack shakes their fragile sense of security. In the wake of the battle, Andrea attempts to broker peace, but both sides prepare for war. The governor secretly plans to execute Rick's group, while Rick wrestles with whether to trade Michonne to him. Eventually, he decides against it, but Merle takes matters into his own hands, capturing Michonne before ultimately letting her go. Determined to weaken the governor's forces, Merle ambushes his men, killing several before the governor executes him. Daryl later discovers his reanimated brother and heartbreakingly puts him down. The final confrontation comes when the governor leads an all-out assault on the prison, only to be ambushed and forced to retreat. Enraged, he massacres his own people and disappears with his few remaining followers. Rick and the others take in the surviving Woodbury citizens, choosing unity over vengeance, and finally beginning to heal from the losses they have endured. Rick's group takes in the survivors from Woodbury and finds refuge in the prison, though Rick has stepped away from leadership. The prison serves as a safe haven for months while Michonne continues searching for the governor, fearing his return. However, safety is short-lived when Patrick, one of the new survivors, falls fatally ill, dies, and reanimates as a walker, endangering everyone inside. Patrick's reanimated form attacks others in a cell block, forcing the group to put down the infected and move the remaining survivors to a different section of the prison. Investigating the outbreak, they realize a deadly flu strain, likely brought in by pigs Rick had attempted to raise, has taken hold. Those infected are quarantined, but fear spreads as they know anyone who dies will turn. Tyrese is devastated when he finds his girlfriend Karen and another survivor, David, murdered and burned in an apparent attempt to stop the infection. Herschel takes on the responsibility of caring for the sick, while Daryl leads a group on a dangerous mission to a veterinary college to retrieve medicine. On the way, they hear a mysterious radio broadcast about Sanctuary. Meanwhile, Rick discovers that Carol was behind Karen and David's murders, believing it was necessary to protect the group. When they go on a supply run together, Rick makes the difficult decision to exile Carol, leaving her to survive on her own. As the illness worsens, several infected succumb and reanimate, forcing the survivors to put them down. Daryl's group returns just in time for Herschel and Bob to distribute the medicine, saving the remaining sick. The group begins to recover, but tensions remain high. Meanwhile, unknown to them, the governor has been watching from a distance, planning his next move. Flashbacks reveal that, after being abandoned by his men, the governor burns down Woodbury and finds refuge with a small family, the Chamblers. He eventually takes over another group and sets his sights on the prison. The governor captures Michonne and Herschel, using them as leverage to demand Rick surrender the prison. Rick offers coexistence, but the governor refuses, executing Herschel and igniting an all-out battle. In the chaos, Lily arrives with her daughter Megan, who has been bitten, forcing the governor to put her down. He then orders a full-scale assault, allowing walkers to flood the prison. As the survivors flee in different directions, Rick and the governor engage in a brutal fight. Just as the governor gains the upper hand, Michonne intervenes and fatally wounds him. While Rick escapes with Carl, Lily delivers the final shot, ending the governor's reign once and for all. Carol and Tyrese capture a Terminus ally named Martin, learning that their friends have been taken and are in danger of being cannibalized by Gareth and his group. While Tyrese stays behind with Judith and Martin, Carol devises a plan to use a herd of walkers as a distraction to infiltrate Terminus and rescue Rick and the others. Amid the chaos, Rick and Carl finally reunite with Judith. Once the group regroups, they debate retaliating against Terminus, but ultimately the others convince Rick to abandon vengeance and instead focus on heading towards Washington, D.C. On their journey, the group saves Father Gabriel Stokes from walkers, and he offers them shelter in his church. However, his suspicious behavior makes them uneasy about staying. Meanwhile, Carol and Daryl leave after spotting a car with a white cross, the same marking on the vehicle that took Beth. As they pursue it, Bob is captured by the remaining Terminus survivors, who amputate and eat his leg. Later, Gabriel is forced to confess that he locked his congregation out of the church, leaving them to be devoured by walkers. When Gareth leaves Bob outside as a taunt, Rick and a small team track Gareth down and kill him. Rick insists they wait for Carol and Daryl before leaving, but Abraham, Rosita, Glenn, Maggie, and Tara decide to continue escorting Eugene to D.C., leaving a map behind for Rick. Beth wakes up in Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, a facility controlled by police officers under the command of Officer Dawn Lerner. While the hospital provides medical care, its system forces patients to work and withholds treatment from those deemed too weak. When Beth resists these harsh rules, she is punished but manages to befriend a fellow patient, Noah. They attempt to escape together. Noah succeeds, but Beth is caught and forced to comply. Just as she is given an order to kill a corrupt doctor, she sees Carol being wheeled into the hospital unconscious. Meanwhile, Abraham's group travels north, where Eugene's growing anxiety leads to tensions. When they encounter an impassable field of walkers, Eugene confesses he lied about being a scientist with a cure, leading Abraham to punch him unconscious in a fit of rage and despair. Daryl and Carol track the cross-marked car to Atlanta, but have their supplies stolen by Noah. After a brief confrontation, Noah returns their gear and tells them about Beth. The three attempt to leave, but Carol is struck by a speeding police car and taken to Grady Memorial. Despite Dawn's belief that Carol is a lost cause, Beth discreetly ensures she receives life-saving treatment. Daryl and Noah return to Rick's group and organize a rescue mission. Meanwhile, Gabriel unintentionally leads walkers to the church, but Abraham's group arrives just in time to help. Rick's group heads to Atlanta, capturing officers to negotiate a trade for Beth and Carol. During the exchange, Beth stabs Dawn, who instinctively shoots and kills her. Enraged, Daryl kills Dawn, but the standoff ends peacefully. Devastated, the group leaves with Beth's body and reunites with Abraham's team. Rick's group heads north, taking Noah to his supposedly safe hometown, only to find it overrun. In the chaos, Tyrese is bitten while protecting Noah and experiences visions of the dead before succumbing to his wound. The group continues toward DC on foot, surviving encounters with walkers and feral dogs. They find bottles of water labeled from a friend, but Rick distrusts them. The next morning, they meet Aaron, who invites them to Alexandria, a walled community. Despite skepticism, Michonne convinces Rick to take the chance. Upon arrival, they meet Deanna Monroe, Alexandria's leader, who interviews them individually and assigns them homes. As they settle in, they realize the community is ill-prepared for the outside world. While Deanna entrusts Rick and Michonne with constable duties, Rick secretly tells Carol that they may have to take over if Alexandria proves too weak to survive. Following the devastating town meeting, Rick and Morgan stumble upon a massive herd of walkers trapped in a nearby quarry. Recognizing the imminent danger, Rick devises a plan to lure the horde away before they can threaten Alexandria. However, his authoritarian leadership causes friction among the Alexandrians, with some contemplating drastic action against him. Meanwhile, Morgan challenges Rick's brutal methods, forcing him to reflect on his choices. As the group executes the plan, an unexpected horn blares from Alexandria, diverting half the herd toward the community and throwing everything into chaos. Alexandria is soon overrun by the wolves, a savage group of raiders who butcher residents in the streets. Spencer manages to shoot an approaching truck driver, inadvertently triggering the blaring horn that draws the walker herd. As the town descends into panic, Carol stealthily makes her way to the armory, distributing weapons to survivors. Morgan, on the other hand, remains committed to his pacifist beliefs, attempting to subdue the attackers without killing them. Meanwhile, Carl tries to protect Ron and Enid, but Ron resists his help, and Enid escapes Alexandria altogether. As the Alexandrians start fighting back, Morgan spares a wolf he previously encountered, convincing the remaining attackers to retreat. Elsewhere, Glenn and Michonne lead a group in an attempt to stay ahead of the diverted herd. However, as the walkers close in, only Michonne, Heath, and Scott make it back to Alexandria alive. Glenn and Nicholas find themselves trapped, surrounded by the dead. In a moment of sheer panic, Nicholas takes his own life, inadvertently knocking Glenn into a swarm of walkers. Meanwhile, Rick attempts to use an RV to reroute the herd, but he is ambushed by the very wolves Morgan had spared. Though he manages to kill them, his RV is too damaged to escape, leaving him stranded as the walkers close in. Flashing back, Morgan is seen living in the woods, struggling with his descent into madness after burning down his home. He encounters Eastman, a reclusive psychiatrist who subdues Morgan and locks him in a makeshift cell. Over time, Eastman teaches Morgan Aikido and a philosophy that all life is precious. However, tragedy strikes when Eastman is bitten by a walker. After putting his mentor down, Morgan continues on his journey and eventually finds a sign leading him to Terminus. In the present, Morgan shares his story with the wolf he's secretly imprisoned, hoping to inspire change. Rick barely makes it back to Alexandria ahead of the walker herd. With the community still reeling from the wolves' attack and now surrounded by thousands of walkers, morale crumbles. As tensions rise, Maggie confides in Aaron that she is pregnant, while Denise struggles with self-doubt as Alexandria's sole doctor. Tara reassures Denise, encouraging her to embrace her role. Meanwhile, Deanna begins to recognize Rick as Alexandria's best hope for survival after he saves her from a walker. While leading the walker herd away, Daryl is separated from Sasha and Abraham when they are ambushed by an unknown group. Daryl is taken hostage by 3 strangers who mistake him for an enemy. Attempting to recruit them, he instead finds himself betrayed when they steal his crossbow and motorcycle. However, he later reunites with Sasha and Abraham, and the trio heads back to Alexandria in a fuel truck. Meanwhile, Glenn, having survived the walker attack, encounters Enid and persuades her to return to Alexandria with him. Back in Alexandria, tensions rise as Ron sneaks into the armory to steal ammunition, while Carol confronts Morgan about his mysterious behavior. Glenn and Enid signal their presence with balloons, giving Maggie hope that Glenn is still alive. However, their relief is short-lived when the damaged clock tower collapses, breaching Alexandria's walls and allowing the walker herd inside. As walkers flood the streets, Rick, Michonne, Carl, Gabriel, and Deanna take refuge in Jesse's house, where they discover Deanna has been bitten. Meanwhile, Carol stumbles upon Morgan's captive wolf and tries to eliminate him, but Morgan intervenes. The wolf takes advantage of the situation, knocking Morgan unconscious, taking Denise hostage, and fleeing into the chaos. As Deanna succumbs to her wounds, Rick and his group disguise themselves with walker guts to maneuver through the herd. Elsewhere, Daryl, Abraham, and Sasha are ambushed by saviors, who claim everything they own now belongs to Negan. After eliminating the Saviors Patrol, Daryl, Abraham, and Sasha resume their journey home. In Alexandria, Carol shoots the wolf as he attempts to flee with Denise, and walkers finish him off. Meanwhile, as Rick's group moves through the herd, Sam panics, drawing attention to himself, Jesse, and Ron, leading to their gruesome deaths. In the chaos, Ron attempts to shoot Rick, but is swiftly killed by Michonne. However, his stray bullet hits Carl, blinding him in one eye. Fueled by grief and desperation, Rick leads a last stand against the walkers. The Alexandrians rally behind him, fighting until the horde is nearly overwhelming them. Until Daryl, Sasha, and Abraham arrive, igniting a fuel fire that lures the remaining walkers to their doom. 2 months later, Rick and Daryl meet Jesus, a mysterious scavenger who leads them to a new community called Hilltop, setting the stage for their conflict with Negan and the Saviors. Negan's victim is revealed to be Abraham, who is brutally beaten to death in front of Rick's group. Enraged by the senseless killing, Daryl impulsively punches Negan, provoking him to murder Glenn as well. Determined to break Rick's spirit, Negan subjects him to a horrifying test, nearly forcing him to amputate Carl's arm. Satisfied that he has established dominance, Negan and his crew depart, taking Daryl as a hostage. Meanwhile, Sasha volunteers to take Maggie to Hilltop for medical care, bringing along the bodies of Glenn and Abraham. Carol and Morgan arrive at the Kingdom, a well-organized community led by the charismatic and theatrical King Ezekiel, a former zookeeper. The Kingdom has been secretly supplying the Saviors to avoid violent repercussions, though Ezekiel keeps this arrangement hidden from most of his people. While Carol initially intends to leave as soon as she recovers, she develops a connection with Ezekiel and chooses to live in an isolated house nearby rather than fully integrate into the community. At the sanctuary, Daryl is imprisoned in a cell, subjected to psychological and physical torment by Negan and Dwight in an effort to break his will. Meanwhile, Negan sends Dwight to capture an escaped savior who would rather die than return. Seeing no other option, Dwight mercy kills him. Negan later offers Daryl a chance to join the Saviors, but Daryl refuses to submit. Back in Alexandria, the survivors struggle under Negan's oppressive rule. The Saviors arrive ahead of schedule for their first offering, seizing Alexandria's furniture, medicine, and all firearms. Feeling powerless, Rick acknowledges to the group that he is no longer in charge and that they must now live under Negan's rule. Rosita, however, takes initiative, finding an empty cartridge case and tasking Eugene with crafting a functional bullet for a gun she discovered in the woods. Carl accompanies Enid to Hilltop to visit Maggie, who is still recovering under Sasha's care. Gregory, furious that Maggie and Sasha failed to eliminate the Saviors, demands that they leave. However, after they help defend Hilltop from a walker attack, Jesus persuades Gregory to let them stay. While the Saviors raid Hilltop's supplies, Sasha asks Jesus to locate Negan's headquarters, and he agrees. Jesus later sneaks onto a Savior supply truck, only to discover Carl hiding inside. 2 weeks after the attack on the Savior outpost, Tara becomes separated from Heath and washes up on a remote beach, where she is rescued by a girl named Cindy. Tara soon discovers that Cindy belongs to Oceanside, a hidden community composed entirely of women and children whose male members were slaughtered by the Saviors. After forming a brief bond with Cindy, Tara returns to Alexandria, vowing to keep Oceanside's existence a secret. Near the sanctuary, Jesus leaps from the Savior truck to scout the area, while Carl remains inside, intent on assassinating Negan. Though he manages to kill 2 Saviors, he is quickly subdued. Impressed by Carl's audacity, Negan gives him a tour of the sanctuary. Meanwhile, Rosita and Eugene successfully craft a bullet, and Spencer scavenges for supplies, only to return and find Alexandria occupied by Negan and his men. With assistance from Jesus and an anonymous source, Daryl finally escapes the sanctuary. At Alexandria, tensions rise as Negan brutally guts Spencer for questioning Rick's leadership. Enraged, Rosita fires at Negan, but only manages to hit Lucille, prompting a rat to kill Olivia in retaliation. As the Saviors leave, they take Eugene hostage. After a conversation with Michonne, Rick regains his resolve to fight back. He and his group travel to Hilltop, where they reunite with Maggie, Sasha, and Enid. Soon after, Daryl and Jesus emerge, and the group embraces, ready to resist Negan's tyranny. Rick, Maggie, and Ezekiel unite their communities in a coordinated effort to take down Negan. At the Hilltop, Gregory tries to convince the residents to side with Negan, but they stand firmly behind Maggie. The group launches an attack on the sanctuary, destroying its fences and flooding the compound with walkers. As the sanctuary falls into chaos, the group retreats, but Gabriel stays behind to help Gregory. However, Gregory betrays him and escapes, leaving Gabriel trapped in a trailer with Negan, surrounded by walkers. Rick's forces split into multiple teams to attack various Savior outposts, leading to intense battles where many members of the group are killed. During one skirmish, Eric is gravely wounded, and Aaron rushes him away in an attempt to save him. Meanwhile, Jesus prevents Tara and Morgan from executing a group of surrendering Saviors. While clearing an outpost with Daryl, Rick is caught off guard and held at gunpoint by Morales, an old acquaintance from Atlanta who is now loyal to the Saviors. Daryl swiftly intervenes, killing Morales before he can harm Rick. The two then track down a group of Saviors transporting weapons to another outpost. Back at the Hilltop, Gregory returns and pleads for re-entry. Despite her anger, Maggie ultimately allows him back inside. Meanwhile, Eric succumbs to his injuries, devastating Aaron. As tensions rise over what to do with the captured Saviors, Jesus insists on taking them to the Hilltop despite objections from Tara and Morgan. Elsewhere, Ezekiel's forces attack another Savior compound, but his fighters are slaughtered while protecting him. Ezekiel, the only survivor among his fallen warriors, is taken captive alongside Jerry. Carol, fighting inside the compound, eliminates most of the Saviors. 2 manage to escape but are later intercepted by Rick and Daryl. As Ezekiel, Jerry, and Carol attempt to return to the kingdom, they are ambushed by walkers. Shiva sacrifices herself to save them, and the loss deeply affects Ezekiel, causing him to withdraw from his leadership role. Meanwhile, Gabriel and Negan, trapped together, confess their sins before ultimately escaping the trailer. At the sanctuary, Negan's absence causes internal conflict among his lieutenants, who suspect there is a traitor leaking information to Rick. The workers are restless, almost rioting before Negan returns to reestablish order. Gabriel, now sick and deteriorating, is imprisoned, where Eugene discovers his worsening condition. Rick and Daryl clash over how to proceed against the Saviors. Rick approaches Jadis in an attempt to gain the scavengers as allies, but she refuses and locks him in a shipping container. Elsewhere, Carl crosses paths with Sadiq and decides to bring him to Alexandria. Daryl and Tara conspire to take matters into their own hands by attacking the sanctuary directly. At the kingdom, Ezekiel isolates himself, struggling with his failures, while Carol urges him to lead. Maggie imprisons the captured saviors and, as punishment for his betrayal, locks Gregory in with them. Eugene, now fully committed to Negan, devises a strategy to eliminate the Walker horde surrounding the sanctuary. Daryl, with the help of Morgan and Tara, drives a truck through the sanctuary's walls, allowing walkers to swarm inside. Unaware of this, Rick convinces Jadis to side with him, and they move toward the sanctuary, only to find the walkers gone and the walls breached. Meanwhile, Eugene secretly helps Gabriel and Dr. Carson escape, struggling with his conscience. Negan takes advantage of the sanctuary's newfound freedom, launching coordinated strikes against Alexandria, Hilltop, and the Kingdom. The scavengers abandon Rick, forcing him to flee back to Alexandria. Aaron and Enid's attempt to secure Oceanside's help backfires when Enid kills Natasha. At the Kingdom, Ezekiel ensures his people escape before locking himself inside with the Saviors. Negan leads an all-out assault on Alexandria, but Carl orchestrates an evacuation plan. Before escaping into the sewers, Carl reveals he was bitten while helping Sadiq. Knowing his time is running out, Carl writes letters to his loved ones, urging Rick to build a better future with the Saviors rather than destroy them. As the survivors regroup at Hilltop, Rick and Michonne stay behind to say their emotional goodbyes to Carl. Meanwhile, Maggie, Michonne, Enid, and Rosita encounter a mysterious woman named Georgie, who offers food and a set of documents she calls a key to the future in exchange for phonograph records. The final battle approaches as Negan arms the Saviors with weapons tainted in Walker blood. Rick and his group fall into Negan's trap, but are saved when Eugene's sabotage causes the Saviors' weapons to backfire. With Negan wounded and the Saviors surrendering, Rick spares Negan's life, honoring Carl's vision for peace. However, Maggie, enraged by Rick's decision, quietly vows to seek justice on her own terms, setting the stage for future conflict. A year and a half after Negan's defeat, Rick pushes for the construction of a bridge to strengthen trade routes between the communities. While some support the idea, others grow resentful, believing Rick is prioritizing unity over individual survival. Tensions mount as differing ideologies clash, threatening the fragile peace that has been established. In a desperate attempt to prevent a massive Walker horde from overrunning the communities, Rick sacrifices himself by destroying the bridge. The explosion sends him into the river below, and he is presumed dead by his allies. His apparent demise sends shockwaves through the survivors, leaving a leadership void and deepening divisions among the communities. 6 years later, Rick's absence has drastically changed the landscape. Once close allies have become distant, each community choosing to look after their own interests rather than working together. Alexandria, Hilltop, the Kingdom, and Oceanside function in isolation, their trust in one another eroded over time. As tensions remain high, a new and terrifying threat emerges. The Whisperers, a group of survivors who wear the skin of walkers to blend in with the undead. Unlike any enemy faced before, they navigate herds with ease, using them as both camouflage and weapons against outsiders. Their presence unsettles the survivors, forcing them to reconsider their place in this dangerous world. Alpha, the ruthless leader of the Whisperers, makes her intentions clear. She warns the survivors not to cross into Whisperer territory, claiming a vast stretch of land as their domain. Her people live by a brutal code, embracing the way of the dead and punishing those who defy their rules without hesitation. Despite the Whisperer's warning, their presence does not go unchallenged. Lydia, Alpha's daughter, finds herself drawn to the survivors and ultimately abandons her mother's brutal way of life. Seeking refuge among the Kingdom's people, Lydia struggles to adjust to a new way of living, while her defection stokes the fury of the Whisperers. Alpha, viewing Lydia's choice as an unforgivable betrayal, disowns her daughter without hesitation. To send a message to the survivors, she infiltrates a grand fair meant to celebrate unity among the communities. Her vengeance is swift and brutal, marking a turning point in the survivors' ongoing struggle. At the fair, Alpha executes a horrifying massacre, targeting key members of each community. When the celebration ends, the survivors make a gruesome discovery. Several of their own have been beheaded, their heads displayed on pikes as a warning. Among the fallen are beloved friends and leaders, their loss shaking the survivors to their core. The horrifying display serves as both a declaration of war and a psychological attack. Alpha has demonstrated her power, proving that the Whisperers are not to be underestimated. In the wake of the massacre, the survivors are left grieving, furious, and uncertain about their future. As they mourn their fallen, the communities must decide how to move forward. Will they continue to live in fear, respecting Alpha's boundaries? Or will they stand together and fight back, risking everything to rid the world of the Whisperers once and for all? Alpha initiates a campaign of chaos against the survivors, orchestrating sporadic walker attacks and acts of sabotage against their communities. These seemingly random assaults weaken their morale, sowing distrust among the groups and making them question their own security. Fear spreads as the survivors struggle to understand the full extent of Alpha's plan. Determined to put an end to Alpha's reign of terror, Carol devises a risky strategy. She recruits Negan, the former leader of the Saviors, to infiltrate the Whisperers. Despite the survivors' lingering distrust of him, Negan sees an opportunity to prove himself useful. He gradually earns Alpha's trust, embedding himself within the Whisperers and studying their ways. After gaining Alpha's confidence, Negan seizes his moment. In a swift and brutal move, he assassinates her, decapitating the Whisperer leader. He then returns to Alexandria with Alpha's severed head as proof of his loyalty. With their leader dead, the Whisperers are thrown into disarray, but the threat is far from over. Beta, Alpha's fanatically devoted second-in-command, refuses to let the Whisperers crumble. He assumes control of the group and vows revenge against the survivors. Under his leadership, the Whisperers unleash their largest horde yet, directing the undead straight toward the communities in a final, devastating assault. The survivors unite for an all-out war against Beta and the Horde. Using strategy, teamwork, and sheer determination, they fight to push back the overwhelming wave of walkers. In the midst of the battle, Beta meets his end, falling to the combined efforts of Daryl and Negan. With his death, the remaining Whisperers scatter, and their reign of terror is finally brought to an end. With the Whisperers defeated, the communities begin to rebuild, but new opportunities and challenges lie ahead. Eugene, having established radio contact with an unknown group, leads a small team to West Virginia to meet them. His hope is that these new survivors could be potential allies, offering a chance for growth and stability. As Eugene's group embarks on their journey, uncertainty looms over their mission. They do not know what kind of people they will encounter or if they can be trusted. Nevertheless, the possibility of expanding their network and finding new resources outweighs the risks, giving them renewed purpose in a world still struggling to recover. Meanwhile, Michonne stumbles upon a life-altering discovery, evidence suggesting that Rick may have survived the bridge explosion. The revelation shakes her to her core, reigniting a hope she thought was lost. Unable to ignore the possibility, she makes the difficult decision to leave her children behind and venture north in search of answers. Her journey is filled with uncertainty, as she has little to go on aside from fragmented clues. However, her love for Rick and the chance to reunite with him fuel her determination. She presses forward, facing the unknown, hoping against hope that she will find him alive. As the communities adapt to their new reality, the survivors remain ever vigilant. Though the Whisperers are gone, new threats and challenges are sure to arise. With Michonne on her personal quest, Eugene forging new connections, and the communities striving to rebuild, the next chapter of their fight for survival begins. Eugene and his group successfully convince the Commonwealth, a vast and well-structured community, to provide aid and shelter to the struggling coalition. The Commonwealth boasts advanced infrastructure and a thriving population, but its rigid class system quickly becomes evident. While some coalition members see it as a chance for stability, others grow uneasy about its strict social hierarchy. Despite initial cooperation, tensions between the coalition and the Commonwealth begin to rise. Governor Pamela Milton, the authoritarian leader of the Commonwealth, subtly exerts control over the newcomers, ensuring they remain in lower social ranks. Her leadership style and favoritism toward the wealthy create division, fueling resentment among those who see the Commonwealth as an unjust system. The situation takes a sharp turn when Pamela's corruption is exposed to the public. The revelation sparks outrage, particularly after her son, Sebastian, is held accountable for his misdeeds. Amid the growing turmoil, Sebastian is killed, further destabilizing Pamela's grasp on power. The fragile alliance between the Commonwealth and the coalition begins to crumble. Rather than address the growing unrest, Pamela chooses self-preservation over her people. When a massive horde of walkers, including newly discovered, more intelligent variants, approaches the Commonwealth, she devises a ruthless plan. Instead of protecting all citizens, she orders the lower-class residents to be sacrificed as a diversion, ensuring the elite's survival. Outraged by Pamela's actions, the coalition refuses to stand by. Led by key survivors, they rally the oppressed citizens of the Commonwealth and ignite a full-scale revolution. The rebellion erupts into a battle for control, with the survivors fighting to dismantle the corrupt regime and build a more just society in its place. In the chaos of the battle, Rosita is tragically bitten while fighting to protect those she loves. Despite the coalition's eventual victory over Pamela, her death casts a shadow over the hard-won triumph. As her friends mourn, they find solace in knowing she gave her life for a better future. With Pamela deposed, a new leadership emerges. Ezekiel, once the charismatic leader of the kingdom, steps up to take over as governor of the Commonwealth. His vision of a fair and equal society offers hope, and under his guidance, the Commonwealth and the coalition begin the difficult process of rebuilding. Meanwhile, an unexpected development unfolds between Maggie and Negan. After years of animosity, Maggie finally acknowledges Negan's efforts to change, accepting him as an ally rather than an enemy. Though their past remains complicated, this moment marks a turning point in their relationship. As stability returns, the communities look toward the future, determined to create a world that values all people equally. Though the road ahead is uncertain, the survivors embrace the possibility of true unity, working together to shape a better civilization. With the Commonwealth secure, Daryl makes the difficult decision to leave. Knowing there are still lost souls out there, he embarks on a journey to find other survivors, continuing the fight in his own way. His departure signifies not an end, but a new beginning, as the world beyond the Commonwealth still holds many untold stories.